We bring back into the show Vance Crowe. He has a podcast. He'll tell us all about this. Vance was also a employee for Monsanto, tasked with a big job, traveling the country, trying to change the mind of millennials when it came to pesticides. Boy. You have a terrific business up, Legacy Interviews, and we're rocking and rolling. We're kind of going with the flow today with the backdrop on you, so we're trying to make you look as good as we can. The key is to make you sound as good as you can, and we've got a lot of things to talk about. I've promoted you, your Legacy Interviews, what you got going on. We'll get into the Legacy Interviews and what you do with that fantastic business at the end. But first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself, your podcast, and your experience.
Yeah, I've been living here in St. Louis for about 10 years, and this has been one of the great things about being in a place like this. I come across people like you and this amazing studio. Who had any idea that any of this was built out here? You know, back when I came here, Monsanto used to have a couple planes, and every once in a while,
oh yeah, this was the Monsanto.
This was the Monsanto hangar.
building.
Yeah, so I'd been here a couple of times before, but then you guys turned it into this beautiful studio here.
We've got a terrific studio here. The Strategic Air Services have done a terrific job at putting everything together here. What about, first of all, tell us about your background, because I think this is fascinating. When we said that you worked for Monsanto and you had to talk about pesticides, that's an evil word.
Well, I came to Monsanto really disliking them. You know, if you look at my biography, I was at all the places.
And you don't work for Monsanto anymore.
No, well, because Monsanto doesn't exist anymore. It's gone.
It's Bayer,
right?
Right? Is it Bayer?
It's Bayer.
So it is Bayer now.
Bayer
yeah,
now.
so Bayer bought it all. But when I was asked to come in and interview for the job was Director of Millennial Engagement, and I thought this was the funniest thing I'd ever heard in my life. Right? Like,
no doubt.
Who in the world, who in their right mind would want to go out and talk to millennials about this stuff? And I thought Monsanto was this dark, evil place, because everywhere I'd ever been, the U.S. Peace Corps, the World Bank, all these, college, they all told me Monsanto is evil. So I took the job interview because I was like, what I want to do is see inside of North Korea, and if I take the interview, I get to go look around this place. And what I found was here was a group of people that were willing to answer any question I had. Because I don't know if you've ever interviewed for a job you don't want, but it's about as much fun as you can possibly have.
It's weird. That is the most odd thing in the world.
It's kind of like a date.
Yeah. So you're out there. Yeah. They can ask you anything you want. I don't want this job, Director of Millennial Engagement.
Yes.
So I'm sitting there saying, they're asking me like, "What's your management style?" And I'm giving them an answer, and then I'm like, "Why are you killing farmers in India?
Yeah.
Why are you enslaving farmers in debt?"
Yeah.
And so they were answering all of my questions, and I get all the way to the end of this interview. And actually, at Monsanto at the time, they did like 7 hours worth of interviews. So I get all the way done at the end of 7 hours, and the person that brought me in comes in and says, "Do you have any more questions for me?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're gonna have a person be the Director of Millennial Engagement. They're gonna go out and talk to millennials about why GMOs aren't bad.
Yeah,
how are you gonna train this person to do this job?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, since you've been so curious during this whole thing where you've been asking us questions, what I think I do is line up a list of 50 people from throughout the company." And have you sit down and ask them any question you want about GMOs, pesticides, how farms work. And after you're done with that list of 50 people, we'll sit down and I'll ask you questions and we'll figure out what you do and don't know. And then we'll write you another list of 50 people. And the light bulb went off in my head. I was like, these people don't understand. Mm-hmm. If I get a chance to interview 50 people, I will find out what's going on here. Yeah. And if they're as evil as everybody says they are, well, then I'm going to go write the greatest tell-all book of all time.
Yeah.
But if they're not as evil as everybody thinks they are, well, then you've just stumbled on maybe one of the most important communications problems in the history of the modern world, which is we're growing food more bountifully than we ever have before. And yet people are angry about how their food is grown. Yeah. They're afraid of it. So how do you turn that around? So that was the job I ended up taking. I did it for 5 years, and it was the most exciting 5 years of my life, going out and trying to figure out what's the truth out there.
What is the truth?
Yeah, really.
Yeah, why? Because we see everybody sends me photos constantly. Says everything says bioengineered. What does that mean?
So bioengineer is when they're saying there's a GMO in here. And the first thing to
Which is everything these days.
Well, actually, not really. There's only 8 or 9 crops right now in the entire United States that are regulated to have a GMO trait in them. The reason that you see it in everything, the reason you see it in crackers and oils and things like this is we put corn and soy in almost everything.
And so that's bioengineered.
And those are the bioengineered things. So when you look around at in the produce section, virtually none of that.
So if you buy something that's corn free or soy free, then it's probably not going to be bioengineered.
Most of the time, right? There's a little bit of sweet corn that has GMOs in it. There's a papaya, because there was this ring spot that it didn't matter how much pesticide you put on it. So they figured out a GMO trait to put into that. But most of the things that don't have, most of the GMOs are in corn, cotton, and soy.
Right.
Damn, that's impressive.
So what, like a person like myself, when we would see planes flying over and spraying everything or whatever, we always thought, you guys, Monsanto always knew better than us. They knew it was safe. And then there became an era where it was like, all right, this is really bad. GMOs, that word came up a lot. We didn't really know that much about it. Did you ever find out? I mean, it sounds like you were like soothed. You went into Monsanto and you were like, okay, maybe things aren't so bad. Did you ever see anything in Monsanto where you're like, oh, this is not good?
Not that Monsanto is doing. I mean, there's a huge incentive. If any one of their 20,000 employees knew that something was off, they could walk out on the street and sell that to any one of the law companies, and you could make millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
But no, I personally didn't. You know, when you think about the pesticides that people are spraying, when I was first confronted with this, you know, you think like, do I want crops with pesticides or without? Well, I want them without, right? Of course. Why would I want chemicals on there?
Right.
But then you start thinking, well, why do you use pesticides? Well, the reason you use pesticides is because you have insects that want those calories, and they're going to eat the leaves, and they're going to burrow into the crops.
Yeah.
And so now you've got to figure out, what are our options for getting rid of those insects?
Yeah.
Well, we could do what they did before we had chemistry, which is send women and children out to those fields to pull it out, right? And literally pick the insects.
That sounds like slavery.
Right? It's the reason that was going on. They needed that human capital.
Right.
You then have the chemical option, so you can use different types of pesticide. You have biological options. These are new ones where we find, hey, what's a natural agent we can use, grow it in giant vats and put it out there.
Yeah.
Or you can create a gene that allows that plant to produce a chemical inside of it that protects it. And that's most of what is in a plant, like nicotine, for example. Nicotine is the naturally evolved chemical that tobacco created in order to be able to keep it from having insects eat it. So you have all these options, and that's what a GMO is. It's giving the plant a trait that allows it to do something it couldn't do before.
Interesting.
But do you feel like maybe they brainwashed you to feel like these things are actually acceptable when they're not? Because what we could do as humans, we could just go out and start our own garden. I would be more than happy to go out into my own garden and pull the insects off and grow food naturally if it meant that I'm going to be a healthealthier person. I don't want to walk into a grocery store, and I'm getting ready to. I don't want to go into a grocery store and see all of this produce stacked up that doesn't look real. It looks like Frankenfood. Some of it has been sitting there, coated in wax for a year before you actually go and buy it. And then we have Monsanto. They have Roundup. People, they lost a huge lawsuit because Roundup was causing cancer.
There you go.
I mean,
That's a good question.
I see where you're coming from. And I'm assuming you obviously know a lot more about Monsanto than I do. But I don't understand how we can possibly think that modifying our food to this degree is good for us. I mean, I know people are living longer, so we can't say, well, it's killing everybody, but we also do have cancers and celiac disease and all of these other things that are happening from potentially modifying not only food, but our dairy and other products we consume.
So when you go into the grocery store, I can understand. You're like, how is it that we have like a perfect avocado? Where the heck did this pineapple
And not just
from?
one, but all of them look exactly the same. They look exactly the same. And if you grow vegetables in your garden, they don't look exactly the same.
I want my apples to look exactly the same.
I do too. I want to know what I'm buying. First of all, let me tell you something. Organic bananas are horrible. They're horrible. I'll buy a GMO banana any day of the week.
So the bananas are a great example.
Yes.
So what people don't realize is there used to be a huge amount of variation of bananas. In fact, if you take one of those little banana candies that you get and you taste that, right? You're like, man, that really tastes like banana, right? But when I go to the store and I get a banana, it doesn't really taste like that, right? It tastes like that, but a little bit more bland. Funny thing is that all this variation of bananas were completely wiped out by a virus. We only have one type of banana that survived that virus.
What year would that have been?
It would have been in the late 60s or early 70s or something.
Just here in the U.S. or across the world?
Around the world, to be able to do it at production level, right? So there are plantains. You can go get other
because other countries do have different varieties of bananas. I've not really seen them here. But sometimes you can see them in other countries.
So one of the big challenges that you have when you're creating produce is not just can we grow it, but can we grow it, pick it, and move it to a place where people want it. So right now, for example, there is a giant drought. It is so big. It is an epic drought that we're going on right now in the United States. So if you get west of Missouri, there's a huge amount of drought. So all the winter wheat, I don't want to say all, a huge amount of the winter wheat that we normally grow, farmers out there, it's toast. It's gone, right?
Yeah.
Well, one of the benefits of the modern food system is that that's okay. You're not even going to experience, it's not like you're going to go to the store and be like, there's no bread here, because we bring in bread from other places. So we have this incredibly sophisticated transportation system to be able to bring in produce where pineapples are grown in Mexico and oranges are grown in Florida. And so you're able to have those in winter and in spring when, here in Missouri, things are just starting to come out of the ground.
Yeah.
So any one of these things has trade-offs. If you want to be able to have vegetables and be able to eat fruit and produce in the middle of the year, you've got to be able to get them from somewhere else. Those places have to make trade-offs. Are we going to have insects that can be able to eat those crops or not?
Or you could grow them yourself. It's, so many people are turning to homesteading, including myself. And where I want to plant, I'm in the process of buying some land.
How do you do that in the middle of
Plant
Manhattan?
trees.
How do you do that in Manhattan?
You know what, Eric? That's why we need community gardens. And some areas have, St. Louis has community
So you got to go all the way to the top of your community garden, on the top of your
what Tabitha says, it's great. Is it realistic? Is it realistic around the country with people's lifestyles?
For all people, no.
Yeah, but for some.
I'm never going to agree that chemicals are good for food or GMO.
We're living longer. You just said it yourself. You just said we're living longer.
We're living longer because they pump us full of medicine to keep you alive.
There are books and literature out there that teach you how to grow in an apartment or on a
hydroponics
or on a deck.
Yeah, but that's not Monsanto's
How many
problem.
people you know doing that, Brojo? How many people you know?
Exactly, 4. He's got 4 people.
I know
if we
no
did
one.
a poll across the United States right now, it would be probably less than 2%.
So the question with Monsanto has never been that, what you're talking about. Monsanto's always been praised for that, as a matter of fact. Thank you guys for spraying all the crops in Nebraska and Missouri and all for keeping the bugs off of it. Thank you. The problem always kind of came in. Are you giving us cancer? Do you know
I
how?
do like that.
Do you know how you're genetically modifying us?
Being healthy.
You know what I mean?
And killing the bees. What about the bees?
Tabitha, hold on. I hear what you're saying too. It's not feasible to do 400 million people in the United States alone. If people want bananas, oranges, strawberries,
I get it. I
grapes,
totally get it.
You can't do it. It's just not. So that is the solution. The problem has always been, probably since the 90s, what I can remember, is can I get cancer? Do I get you? Will you give me cancer? If my kid forgets to wipe the apple off, am I screwed? Do I have those pesticides on there? That has always been Monsanto's biggest problem to me. How does it talk about the cancer problem?
So this is really interesting. I haven't talked about this stuff in a couple of years because it hasn't been my job,
right?
But I'm totally down to do it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a question we all have, right?
Yeah.
I feed my children food, and I have to make decisions on, do I want to use one that allows glyphosate, which is the main ingredient in Roundup, or do I want to use one that is organic, right?
Okay.
Is that going to make a difference? Should I spend more money? I have a 2-year-old daughter. I will do anything for her.
Yes.
So I am going to look deeply into this.
Yes.
And the thing about it is people have this conception that if you do organic, those are the good chemistry.
Only if you're growing it yourself.
Only if you're growing it yourself.
Only if you're growing it yourself. Organic, in my opinion, at the grocery store is no better than anything else.
Wow.
But you know what? I talked to a gentleman. He makes a lot of money as a venture capitalist in ag. And he told me, when I told him about what we had heard, and he's like, well, that's not true in all the cases. He's like, there is a stamp where a piece of fruit has to get a maybe USDA certified organic stamp.
A stamp by the USDA, who is just as corrupt.
Well, I know, but then you got to go in, but then you got to go into conspiracy theory to believe
it's
that.
Not a conspiracy theory. They're a very corrupt organization.
Okay, well, everybody's corrupt then.
That's true.
So it's a complicated subject. And one of the things that I would say is glyphosate is a very interesting chemical.
It is.
So the thing about, do you know why glyphosate works, how it kills a plant?
I don't.
I do not know.
So this is fascinating. I thought it was like going and spraying acid on a plant,
There we
right?
go.
I was
There we
like,
go.
okay, you're going out there, you're spraying acid on that
Mhm.
one or burning it somehow, and you're not doing it on this one. It turns out actually glyphosate was this profound discovery that you can trick a plant into thinking it's fall and that it should stop producing energy towards making seeds and growing up and trying to spread itself. You say, you know what, summer's over. We're now turning to fall. So
Okay.
you shut the whole process off.
Yeah.
So it actually is not burning it at all. It's sending a signal. And when you make a Roundup ready crop, what you've done is you've said, wait, if you get hit with this glyphosate, just ignore it. Just keep growing like regular.
Yeah.
So these weeds, when they were getting it, they were getting a signal to say, summer's over, time for fall, go to seed,
Yeah.
stop doing it. Whereas other chemicals that you're using to kill weeds are not operating in that paradigm. So they're operating in there's all different kinds of mechanisms that you can use. And glyphosate, because it was so used, because there were so many people that would say, hey, there's an opportunity here to sue Monsanto if it's done anything wrong, is probably the most studied molecule in the entire world.
Right.
And when we think about those cancer cases that came up, and I'm not defending them, I haven't kept up on those cases. There were many, 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 many cases that came out and they were like, no, it's clearly not. No, it's clearly not. No, it's clearly not. And then a case in California came out and said, yes, Monsanto's done something bad here, and we think that they should be charged for it. And now that's going through appeal. I actually think that this show, Cancel This, is a very good example of this is one of those things that everybody thinks they have a really deep knowledge of glyphosate and crops. And yet really it's people saying, hey, you should know this and you should know this. And you confuse people and they say, I don't know, so I'm going to throw up my hands. But as I looked into it for 5 years, what I found was this is far better than the herbicides we were using before. Yeah. It's the most environmental one that we've ever had because it enables farmers to not have to go out and plow their fields and watch it erode away. And that it's the most studied chemical. So.
But here's the problem.
I have to leave. Can I just say one thing before
hold on
I
a
go?
second. Not with
Well, I have to
millennials.
leave.
Oh, you're right.
I literally have to leave.
Where are you going?
Yeah, she's
I
out
have
here.
to leave. I have to leave to go to work.
Okay,
I
go
just
ahead,
want to say
Tabitha.
one thing, and I hope we have you back because I think farmers would disagree.
Will you come
They're not
back
happy
on?
about
Yeah,
having
anytime.
Monsanto.
But he's not even a representative for Monsanto.
I know he's not. I just said it. I think they brainwashed him while he was there.
They didn't
Oh my
brainwash him.
God.
No, that is take that back
But I
immediately.
think he's a fantastic
You scared
person.
away the nation's
take
number
that
one
back immediately.
paleontologist last
I
week.
know.
What the heck is wrong with you?
I'm very distrustful.
Have you ever heard
our
of the like a disagreeability test on the Big Five personality test?
She's
So
number one.
from a 0 to 100. 100 is like a mom with a crying baby, and she doesn't care why people are disagreeing.
Yeah.
She just wants everybody to be quiet. I'm a 1 on that scale.
I
I disagree with people all the time, and I'm more than happy to come in here and be asked questions. Like I love it.
I love it too.
What
We're learning
would
so
the
much.
what would the topic be?
When he
Yeah.
comes back in?
Yeah, because you
I
said
would
farmers.
like to talk more about I used to have
How
a
about-
segment with
He
Garrett
works with
Hawkins.
farmers a
If
lot.
you know Garrett Hawkins with the Missouri Farm Bureau. And we talked so often. He's our number one politician that represents farmers here in the state of Missouri. And we talked so much about how farmers are being forced to grow GMO crops. They don't have a choice. Monsanto gives them the seeds. They say, well, if you don't use our seeds, guess what? Your farm is going to be shut down. You will no longer be growing
that's
anything.
different. That's
so when you come
different.
back, I would like to talk about
We
that.
can talk all about that.
Okay.
So the problem,
And
Thank
guys
you,
can
Tab.
talk amongst yourselves.
the problem is with Monsanto is this. Check this out.
Well-
So 2 years ago, Vic, I'm trying to spray my damn weeds around my pool, right? On Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 5, one of you dopey ass local TV stations came up and said that Monsanto Roundup, in particular, would cause cancer if you sprayed it, right? It's not. I'm not a millennial. I don't care about the GMO stuff so much, but boy, I didn't want to get cancer. That is kind of where the problem is with these pesticides is just that weird knowledge that you don't really have a lot of knowledge about. That's really what it is. It's like you don't totally know. You just hear the media saying, look, this is going to cause cancer if you spray it around your pool or around your whatever.
So one of the things that changed my mind because I went into Monsanto expecting that all these things that you hear are true. So I was prepared to be like, I found it.
Yeah.
But you're going out and you talk to farmers, right? And these guys now have a real incentive. One, to make their crops grow as fast as they can and as best as they can. So they have a financial incentive.
Yeah, it's money.
But what people don't understand is if you're living on a farm, you're drinking well water.
Yeah.
Where's that well water coming from?
Thank you.
It's coming from the water that is draining off of your fields.
Yeah.
And so I've had, I couldn't even tell you, hundreds of farmers tell me, I studied this glyphosate issue.
Yeah.
I drink the water that comes off of the fields that I plant on. My family doesn't have these problems that people are claiming are going on.
Yeah.
To me, it's going to be really, cancer is one of those complicated things. You know, there's a whole bunch of reasons why people get exposed to things, what's in their air. But when I look at the other options for spraying around in my bricks, glyphosate is by far the one that I want to choose. In fact, you know, the company Scott's Lawn Company actually is the one that owns the rights to be able to put Roundup in little jugs, right? Monsanto doesn't sell those. It's actually, they sell it to Scott's. There was a time when Scott started putting something else, a type of dicamba in their Roundup things, and it was called Roundup. And I saw that, and I was so angry because I was like, I want to spray glyphosate on my bricks.
Yeah.
I don't want to spray dicamba out there.
Yeah.
Because glyphosate's been studied way more than dicamba. There's nothing wrong with dicamba as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
But to me personally, that's what I'm using. I am using Roundup. I want it to be as close to just glyphosate and water as it can possibly be.
Okay. Now, when you were with Monsanto, you had a chance to interview Jordan Peterson. What was that about, and what was that experience about?
So when I came into Monsanto, I shook things up, right? They were having all these problems getting their scientists to go out into the country and try and talk with people, because people like Tabitha would say, I have these questions. Yeah. I'm angry. I'm upset. Which is totally fine, right? She deserves to do that. I came in and said, I'm no longer, when I'm the director of millennial engagement, I'm not going to sponsor conferences so I get 5 minutes on a stage to be like, Monsanto's not that bad. Because then all you're doing is finding the market rate for how much people don't want to hear what you have to say. So what I did was I said, I'm going to go find who are the activist groups, where are the college campuses that things they dislike us the most. Because it doesn't matter how many billboards you put up to North Korea, nobody's going to North Korea. But if Kim Jong-il says, hey, I'd be willing to come speak to your group, you'd be like, here you go. Here's a chair right here. So I started going to these places and we started really making inroads. We started really changing people's minds because they started to realize, hey, there's trade-offs. Hey, this is more complicated than what the media has been telling me, what's been pumped down me. And I made such good inroads that eventually the president of the American Farm Bureau came to me and he said, hey man, I am not here because I'm trying to make a name for myself. I already farm. I'm ready to be retired. Like I'm just here because I want to make a difference. You're pushing the envelope. What could we do that would really make farmers think, really push the envelope? And I said, well, how much do you want to push the envelope? and so he said, well, I really want to do something that's going to get people excited. And I said, this is when Jordan Peterson was, very few people knew him. I had heard him really early on. And I had said, hey, there's a guy out there that he's explaining something that farmers come to me and talk about all the time. So I'm traveling around the country speaking with farmers, and they would say, hey, one of the reasons I don't want to send my kids off to college is I send them off to school to go to ag school. And one of two things happens. Either one, they come back from school and they've been converted into this other way of thinking. So they think our farm is terrible. They think what we're doing is awful.
Yes.
They don't want anything to do with us. Or two, I send them off to school and they have to hide out in the ag program because every time they leave the ag school at the English department, the history department, they're being told they're awful. What is going on here? And I didn't have an answer. But I had heard this guy, Jordan Peterson, talking about what was going on in the schools, what was happening. I was like, Zippy, if you want to do something that pushes the envelope for farmers, if you really want to help them out, bring this guy in. And I knew the Monsanto executives. I had been like, hey, here's some videos of him talking. We should do this. And they all agreed. American Farm Bureau does it. The day before he goes on stage, Slate magazine finds out about this and they start writing articles.
What is Slate for our listeners and viewers who don't know? What's Slate?
So if you were to look at the distribution of different types of media outlets, Slate would be like far left, right? It would be, and this is where they allow anybody to write for them as long as you're writing the angle of the story that they want. And so they were like, and there was a big group of people that we had kind of, in my work, had won over. The left generally hated Monsanto, hated GMOs, but I had gone out and spoken to a lot of them. So they were like finally starting to see that, hey, GMOs have a place in our agricultural system.
Yeah.
But they ideologically, politically did not see the same thing. So when they found out that Monsanto was helping bring Jordan Peterson in, they flipped a gasket. And so people started trying to like say, not only should this not happen, we should boycott this. The guy that set it up, Vance, who we used to really like, we thought he was really open, interesting, talking about crops. He should be fired. Everything, so it just blew up. But I'll tell you, to Monsanto's credit, which no longer exists anymore, and more importantly, to the American Farm Bureau's credit, they were like, we are tired of being canceled. We're tired of being shouted down. So we're going to do it anyway. And afterwards, I had people come up to me and say that was the longest line for a speaker we've ever had, and this is before he's popular. So then
Jordan Peterson, by the way, for our listeners or viewers who may not know, and most of our audience does, a Canadian psychologist, media commentator. I think the last time I checked, he had nearly 7 million subscribers, not just followers, subscribers to all of everything that is Jordan Peterson related.
Yeah. And when he was originally with me,
and your boys with him.
Well, I don't know about that. I was early, right? And what was funny was after they attempted to cancel me, 2 days after he did that thing with the American Farm Bureau, front page of the New York Times says Jordan Peterson is the most important public intellectual in the Western world. And I was like, I just did a reverse.
Honey, look at this.
Yeah, but it didn't matter.
Honey, I'm kind of cool. I get it. But his message was what you just said, right? It was to protect farmers, who you are, the history, the values of what has made farming what it is and made America what it was, and hopefully can still.
Has there ever been a study where lab results have come out and said this is completely safe? I mean, it's like red dye 8. You remember the red dye? All the chemicals that Monsanto puts in the world. Everything is good here. I mean, why hasn't there been that level of research, marketing at least, to say Monsanto, if it wasn't for Monsanto, the world would be X?
So this is why they were so perplexed, because first of all, it's impossible to have a study that says this is safe. Yeah. The only thing you can say is we have no evidence that this is doing something wrong, because safe is a complicated idea, right? But it's like you can't prove a negative. Like, prove I didn't just fly in here on a car. Well, how can you prove that, right? Unless you saw me.
Yeah.
So in any case, they have all these studies, hundreds, thousands of studies, and they would build websites and say, here are all the studies we had. Here are all the studies we submitted to the USDA. These are all the studies that have been done in college campuses. You can look at all the studies, and they are still running at 100% clear, right? But people didn't want to look at it, or they'd say, where are the studies? Or, oh, those aren't the right studies. So Monsanto, that's why they took the chance of hiring somebody like me, which was to be like, we've tried to show the studies. We've tried to prove that this is as safe as it can, as we can.
But has there ever been an advocate come out and say, we've looked at this thing for the last 40 years. This is fine. And then just put all the research out there so that the millennials or whoever it is that is worried about it, because we're all worried about something in this world. Has there ever been a study that's like it's fine, or the FDA even coming out and saying this stuff is fine? This is all conspiracy talk over here.
Well, so I'm just going to keep pissing off people that are listening, but yes, right? Like, there are so many different groups that have come out. Here's a funny thing that people talk about. They say, you know what? Why is it not safe for Europe, but safe for the United States? I go over to Europe and I don't have any GMOs. Here's the funny thing about Europe. They don't grow any GMOs, but they definitely import them.
Right.
And they are fed to their cattle that are producing the milk, that are making the cheeses that people say, oh, that's not going on here.
Yeah.
And the reason they're doing that, the Europeans said, when you do GMOs, what you actually need are less chemicals, less tractors.
Yeah.
And Europe said, if we do that, it also means we need less farmers.
Yes.
So they started to say, we're going to block things like these technological advances because we want more farmers. It was a protectionist method, but they're like, we can't feed our population this way. We still need these crops. Yeah. So GMOs are not banned in Europe. They're just banned from growing them. And even not even in the entire continent. You can grow GMOs in Spain, but people don't know that. They hear GMOs are banned in Europe. They must be safer than us, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
It is fascinating, the entire situation of what we're learning today. And all of our comments are saying that. We're talking with Vance Crowe. He used to work for Monsanto, of course, and now Bayer.
I don't work for Bayer.
I mean, no. Now Monsanto is Bayer.
Okay, yeah.
And now, what are you up to right now? I mean, we'll talk about legacy in a second. Is it the whole podcast? Do you still have any sort of dealings with the ag industry right now?
So now people hire me, like organizations like Farm Bureau groups, co-ops, farm credits, invite me to come out to say, how do we have better conversations with some of our critics? And
good question.
And so
Yes.
my job, oftentimes people will have me come out and give talks to their organization of, hey, we've got people that want to shut down my pig operation, or I've got a cattle ranch and people want me not to be able to use water. I want to go fight them, right? I want to go argue with them.
Yes.
What can I do? So I am brought in to say, hey, this is why people think what they think. And these are ways that you can have better conversations. And just like today, like Tabitha, not won over, but we've started a conversation. And I think a lot of farmers have been so pushed out of the conversation that they just want to wipe their hands of it. They say, you know, what I can't have a good conversation. I'm done talking to these people.
Yeah.
But that you're not going to win that way. You've got to keep.
No, Tabitha's the exception. Well, maybe she is the rule, but Tabitha starts from the pessimistic side of everything. She believes everything. If it's a conspiracy theory, she's in. She's all in, and it's up to you to prove to her that she was wrong.
Well,
does that make sense?
It does.
And there's a lot of people like that. I, on the other hand, I'm kind of more like, better safe than sorry.
But it's all good. All of our perspectives are there. The questions are good. It's all about the talk. That's how this podcast started. And if you look at any podcast research, which I did as we started this whole podcast, and if you go back and continue to look at all the surveys and all the research that's done, the number one reason people go to podcasts is to learn something new. You need information to get that content. When we bring somebody like Vance on, we're hitting a grand slam because we're learning new information about topics and subjects that most of America doesn't know. We're not in the farming industry. We hear headlines. We read headlines. We see media. We may talk to a farmer here or there. That's what this information is about. And that's why I appreciate you jumping in when you do this. Now, do you cover these topics on your podcast as well?
Yeah. So my podcast, what I try and focus on is where are there ideas that very few people have ever heard of or even like. So I try and find people that are talking about things that the media, it's just not gotten out to the broad scale media. I mean, it's a lot like what you're doing here. You're pushing the envelope to say, what are things? So sometimes it's talking about ag. Just yesterday, I was talking to a guy that runs a cattle operation, and I was asking him, hey, what's going on with the cattle markets? Do you know what's going on with cattle right now?
No, we need that. We promoted you talking with cattle.
So
let's jump right in. That's what you do in your podcast.
So this is a big deal. So what is going on is there is an epic drought going on everywhere west of Missouri. But even right now, even in this area, we're in basically a 2-year drought, right? Down all the way through Texas, Nebraska, Kansas, they're in an epic level 5 drought. We don't have a color on a map that says worse drought than this, right? And so not only was that's right. Yeah. Not only was winter wheat killed this year, so we're not going to be producing very much out of there. Most of the cattle that comes out of the West are on ranches where they just put the cattle out there in the pastures and they let them eat until they get to be about 800 pounds or so, maybe 750 pounds. Well, those guys, if your grass doesn't grow, you now have to go out and buy hay to be able to feed those cows. But if your neighbor and your neighbor's neighbor and everybody for hundreds of miles doesn't have hay, now you got to drive further and further and further to go get that hay. So it's becoming way too expensive to be able to feed cattle.
Now, what area in the country is this? Is this Kansas to Colorado to in that?
All the way north. So if you just think all the states that are just to the west of Missouri, that like belt of states, the entire distance from north to south is in a really big drought. Really? Basically from the Rockies all the way through the plains, all the way to Missouri. And the drought is spreading here, but it's pretty bad there.
Okay.
So what's gone on is it's become so unprofitable for farmers to be able to raise cattle, because if you got to feed them hay, you're paying for that hay. You're not just putting them on your land, and you're driving that hay. So people have started saying, I'm getting rid of cows. I'm getting out. Yeah. And we've brought the herd. Just a couple of weeks ago, it was like the national herd, if you add up all the cattle, is now below 1970s level. Well, in the last week or so, it's starting to say, no, now we've actually gone to the 1960s level. And farmers are now starting to they're selling their heifers into the system. They're saying, so this means the cattle that are going to have more cows, right? We're not going to keep those around we're going to sell them, which means the herd's going to get lower and lower and lower. And it's because this drought is causing all kinds of problems. And then on the other side, you guys mentioned just the other day about Tyson, like they're lowering the amount of food that they're projecting that consumers, the amount of meat people are going to eat. So they're going to start, lowering down how many cattle are they going to buy?
Well, hopefully we didn't sound stupid when you were listening to us on that.
No.
I'm like, oh crap, we're going to get a report card here.
Well, and that's fine because we're the voice of what people talk about around the table, correct?
That's right.
You're the ones that are like, wait a minute, hold on, settle down now. You're not going to get cancer because of whatever. But what do the millennials have to say about this? When you're talking to them, if you're discussing, are they coming at you ferociously? Like, I mean, we kind of, I think we're older guys. What do the younger people say about all this stuff?
Well, the funny thing is the millennials are now the ones that are going to have kids are having kids, although that's actually not as many as used to.
Gen Z.
So the millennials are starting to come to the realization like, hey, I need food to be affordable.
Okay.
I need my money not to be inflated to hell.
Right.
The younger people, what we've noticed, or at least what I've observed just anecdotally, is there is nowhere near the pressure on things like GMOs and pesticides that there were. But a big part of that was the reason that pressure. So let me tell you guys a story. When I would tell people that I worked at Monsanto, you'd be at like a conference or a dinner party or something. If you're at a conference, you wear a name badge, right? Yeah. So I'd be talking to somebody and they'd be like, oh, this guy's interesting. What's his name? And they'd look down at my name badge and they'd see, oh, his name's got Monsanto on it.
Yeah.
So then they'd like pick their head up and then they'd look over their left shoulder, then they'd look over their right shoulder, and then they'd go, look, I don't have a problem with you.
Oh boy.
But I got a friend that really hates you, right?
Yeah.
And this happened over and over and over again. And what I found was people didn't actually have that much knowledge about Monsanto, or even those strong of feelings.
Yeah.
They just heard through the propaganda machines that millions against Monsanto, everybody hates this. And so you start to have this, I'm on the side of good, or I'm on the side of right because everybody I know thinks this. And so that kind of changed their perspective. Well, after Bayer bought Monsanto, the propaganda money that was being funneled into this thing evaporated, which is why you don't see the same documentaries being made. You don't hear the same propaganda. You don't actually have this big fight about GMOs. A lot of that, in my opinion, was fed by a propaganda machine that was losing when Monsanto brought in their style of agriculture, whether you like it or not. That's where my perception is. A lot of
did they sell to Bayer because of the perception of Monsanto? Do you think?
Who knows?
I think
because that was one of the most profitable companies on the planet at one time. So is it
so
possible?
Is Bayer.
Yes, well, that's true.
Bayer actually viewed Monsanto as a different. So my personal belief was the ability to innovate in the United States has been stripped from our companies. Monsanto, the thing that they really were was a brilliant company that did all kinds of crazy ideas. And most of them didn't work, but the ones that did were blockbusters, right? But what happened along the way is, as you start innovating, you start saying, hey, if you guys, the people that protested against Monsanto did the biggest favor to Monsanto that they possibly could have ever done. In fact, if Monsanto was trying to create a way for them to print money, it would be go hire protesters, because what happened would be, if you're creating a new GMO, it's going to cost you, let's say, $100 million to get that through the regulatory body. Yeah. All these people come out and say, Monsanto's bad, you cause cancer, you should do all these things. Yeah. Monsanto will be like, you know what we'll do? We'll go ahead and add on 3 more years of testing, $10 million a year. So now in order to get a GMO to market, it went from 100 million to 130 million. No small new companies can do that. Only the biggest companies can do it.
And that's what freaking happens. But you know what's interesting? I have a friend who works at Bayer, and he loves the guidance. He loves the direction of Bayer right now. He said they're willing to go out on a limb and try to do some new things and not just stay status quo like a lot of old companies do and act scared.
Yeah, and so that's what I was saying. I think the guys that were running Monsanto were like, it's too expensive. We don't have the capital to be able to keep trying new things, because every time we try and put it out, it's going to cost us so much in regulation. If there's somebody else that can come in and handle this, then we will. And so to me, losing Monsanto was one of the losses of a great system of innovation. Yeah. And what we need in the place of it is 100 or 1,000 new small companies that are coming up with new innovative ideas.
Are we seeing that? Do you see that anywhere?
I think the regulative body in the United States makes it so the only place you can innovate is on a computer screen.
I mean, if they could somehow...
Exactly. Damn, that's a good point.
Is Gen Z is looking for like a company that can invent a new style of water with no byproduct whatsoever. You spray it on it and you have the same results. That will never happen, will it? I mean, it's just like chemistry is what it is.
Well, there are wildly cool innovations coming in agriculture. So there's this whole new field called biologicals. So this is where you're going into the soil because we now have the ability to genetically test all kinds of things in the soil. So if somebody will go take out a spoonful of soil and they'll say, what's in here? Now, some of those, that microbiome, the same thing that you have in your gut that determines, hey, can I process this food or not? Probiotics, right? You can find bacteria in that soil that that pushes away insects, that gets rid of or creates some kind of protection or makes that soil better able to grow roots.
Yeah.
And so you can find out which one of those bacteria is it. Let's grab that out. Let's put it in a vat. Let's grow it up in huge quantities. And now instead of using chemistry, you're going out and you're using biology to be able to grow these crops.
Yeah.
So it seems like people are like, I like that.
And not
that
to mention
feels more natural.
GPS systems and the technology that people are using. Absolutely. Yeah.
Just out of because we've been talking to you for a while and there's still, what is going on with the egg prices, the egg industry? I mean, those prices are up and down and all around. Is there any reason why this is happening?
So so for people that don't know, a few months ago, egg prices, you probably didn't see it at first, but egg prices at the wholesale level, the person that is selling eggs into the system went up to $5 a dozen, right? And then eventually you saw those prices in the grocery store. People start complaining about it. You start seeing signs in your grocery store about how expensive they were. Well, then all of a sudden the price collapsed. And now, right now, eggs are selling for about 95 cents a dozen. So you've gone from $5 down to below $1. It used to be that a 3 or 5 cent move in the price of eggs was like people throwing their arms up and freaking out because this was a big deal. Well, now we're watching $4 changes along in the eggs. And people have trouble knowing why is this going on.
Yeah.
One of the things that happened is there was an avian flu that went through the United States, and the government did everything they could to keep that quiet.
Yeah.
So you got migratory birds. They, are pooping as they're flying across the plains. And if you have free range birds or birds that are out in the open, or somebody walks on that and then comes into the chicken coop, you're watching millions of birds get killed. So the supply of eggs went down. And so the amount that the price went. Now this collapse, it's hard to say. You know, people went away from college, so you don't have as many institutional eggs going.
Do you believe there's anything nefarious going on? Because our co-host over here would say this is government related. And someone like me, I'm always looking.
Which co-host is that? Projo or
you,
Tabitha?
Tabitha, not you, of course. But is there something? Is the government trying to control food sources?
Oh, that I don't think so. I think my perspective is, as soon as the government touches it, they're gonna screw it up.
Okay,
they're gonna make it worse.
Are they maybe it's not nefarious, but are they screwing up the market of eggs and of poultry or whatever?
This is hard to say. You know, anytime, one of the things I can say is they've made it so burdensome for a small egg processor to exist. The amount of paperwork you got to do, the amount you have to pay a low skilled worker to be able to do their job. They've made it so hard that the only people that can compete are the larger and larger egg producers.
Okay.
Now, those producers, when you only have a few, they can control the price a lot more. When you have a lot of small guys, hey, they're going to keep that price balanced because as demand goes up, they'll create more eggs. As demand goes down, they can scale back. So for me, I think it's the regulation that the government puts in is causing these situations where it's much harder for the market to react.
So why can't we kill two birds with one stone and have a bunch of free range chickens eat all the insects and not have to use the chemicals?
So free range
look at the
chickens,
big brain on him.
I love free range anything. One of my buddies grows free range pigs, and that is the best pork chop you will ever have.
Yeah.
So I appreciate and understand that there is something that tastes qualitatively different about having that ranged animal, right? And everybody would want that. There's a flip side, though. When you have free range, those are the ones that actually get diseases because they're getting exposed to migratory birds that are spreading diseases around.
Yeah.
They also have no protection. Like, we've bred these birds to not be able to protect themselves from hawks. So you put them out in the open, and you're basically creating like a old country buffet for hawks, and they just go in there. And
True story.
And frankly, like when you're doing free range, you also are adding different kinds of bacteria into the system. And we haven't been eating open range chicken for a long time. And so you just have to adjust for that. So there's trade-offs for it.
I'll tell you this.
I figured.
There's nothing more free range than reindeer and elk up in Alaska. And it was the worst meat I've ever
Was it
had.
really?
It was horrible.
Are you sure it just wasn't the brand?
I will take the corn-fed cows that they serve over here at Ruth's Chris any day.
I'm with you on that as well. I appreciate it. By the way, this is Cancel This, CancelThisShow.com. I'm Vic Faust with Eric Johnson, Tabitha Hasselhead. Leave a bit early. Pro Joe's here. And we have Vance Crowe on with us, telling us about his experiences when he worked with Monsanto, which is now turned into Bayer. He is an accomplished speaker. He's a podcaster, author as well yet.
No.
That'll be
Who
coming.
reads books?
Just use AI to write your book for you. You'll be fine.
You're super popular with our guest, and you will be. And this will blow out numbers because what you bring to the table is so valuable. And we always it's like we want to know. We're knocking on the door, and you're opening it up and giving us information from somebody who's there, not well, this is my opinion. This is what I think's what's happening.
Yeah.
And we need this. And that's why, we could take a topic each and every week. Somebody did want to know, are you currently still doing podcast, and how can they find your work?
Yeah. So I have what's called the Vance Crowe podcast. It's different than what you guys are doing. You guys are on the edge of the seat. What's going on in the news today? Mine is a once a week podcast. And I interview people for about an hour and a half at a time. And it's on subjects that I think are interesting. So in the month of October, I did Memento Mori, Remember You Will Die. And I interviewed everybody from the entire chain of life. So I interviewed an OBGYN. What's it like when you have a baby? What's going on when new life begins? All the way out to a funeral director. And
wow.
what is it like when
I'm watching that.
That's so freaking cool.
So
I told you you'd like this guy.
Okay.
It's fascinating.
Just do your thing here once a week. We'll just do it together.
Your paranormal thing. This is like, I'm so pulled in towards this. Like what you guys were doing on Friday. I'm like a sucker for this.
Me too. but I'm a sucker.
What did we do last Friday?
The mud bones. That were gonna,
All right, here's my question to you.
Oh my God.
When you listen to us, when you listen to Tabitha in the whole GMO thing, do you think of us like, those people who know not what they talk about? These conspiracy theories that are living out there in the ecosphere. Do you look at us?
Keep in mind, he had a job where he was ripped on a daily basis.
I get it.
Yeah, that is some tough skin over there.
Did you look at us like, you guys just don't know what you're talking about? The conspiracy theorists is, come on, guys.
No, I think the thing that made me different from a lot of other people that work in the communication space is I was sitting there totally prepared to throw Monsanto under the bus if they found out something I didn't know. So I ultimately got to the point where I was like, where can I go that somebody can give me a complaint or a problem that I can't find an answer to, right? Because all the easy ones, the ones that I thought when I first came in and interviewed for them, they were like, look, we've got the studies. Let me show you how we do the testing. Let me show you. So I kept going. So I made it all the way up to MIT. And I was like at the highest levels of academia saying, if you have a question, if you know something about this I don't know, then I want to know. But if I've already heard the answer to this and I know that what you're putting forward has already been answered, then I'm going to try and answer that. So as long as you keep an open mind and you say, I am not right about this. I'm not trying to prove you guys right or wrong. All I'm trying to do is be like, let's get through the questions that we know we can get answered. And let's find out if there's one. That's why, like, when he jumps in and says, hey, what about free range chicken? What about these things? I'm open to it. I want as many tough questions as I can get because I don't give a shit if Monsanto's doing something bad. Let's get out. Let's get
and you'll make $1 million off your book.
Right? Exactly.
Hey, by the way, just because I want to promote you the best way possible, can you take a step to your right really quick?
Sure.
And then bring the mic with you?
Yeah.
Because I wanted people to see legacy. And
I was afraid I broke the thing when we first started.
No, we broke
I'm not
the thing.
touching anything.
No, this is information that's out there. Pro Joe took care of it, and we're glad that we were able to make that work. Can you talk to us about legacy interviews? Because when you and I had a chance to talk off live air of this podcast, you told me what you're doing. I think it's fantastic. And I think people would love to jump in with this product and the service that you're offering to people.
Man, thank you so much for the chance to talk about it. This has been my life's passion. What I have discovered is that there are so many people out there that they want to capture their family history and give future generations the opportunity to know that history. So what I do is I record individuals and couples in my podcast studio. I have a whole video set up. And I get people in there talking about, hey, what was it like when you were growing up? what was your career like? Hey, what
awesome
challenges did you have in your
Love
marriage?
that.
You know, how did parenting go? What did you learn along the way?
Mhm.
And what wisdom do you want to make sure gets captured?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times now people are having kids at a much older age. So if you're in your 30s, hey, grandma and granddad might not be their sharpest. They might not have all these stories when the kids come of age and they really want to know. Their grandkids are old enough to understand. And so what I'm trying to do is to give people the opportunity to really pass down their family history. And, you know, you think about this, there have been a lot of studies that have shown that a child that knows who they are in their family, what their family stories are, how they overcame problems, they're going to be way less likely to get pulled into all the bullshit that you guys were talking about before. Because what those kids are is they're lost and they're looking for somebody to tell them, how do I fit into this world? So my work is really about trying to make it so grandparents, parents can pass that knowledge on so future generations feel a part of a long fabric.
Could you imagine if you had a video, Vic, of your great grandfather
when he was talking
from 1904?
I do.
Talking right to you.
Yeah.
Son,
I do.
Daughter.
How do people contact you for this? Because you're not originally from St. Louis. You've been here from Central Illinois, and you're coming into the area. And of course, we're trying to promote the hell out of you and do what we can to help you out. I mean, you've been terrific for our podcast today as well.
Well, so the easiest way is just to go to legacyinterviews.com. You know, I think there'll be a lot there that people can take in about the different ways that we do it, whether you want to do it with just one parent or you want both parents to do it together. You want to do a half day, you want to do a full day, and just start playing with the idea. Just start saying, hey, what would it be like to hand to my children or my grandchildren a video, and really think about that. And what investment would you be willing to have to be able to get a video of your great grandfather telling you about his life?
Yeah.
So it's really having people start to think about, what is that investment worth to me?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
everything to me.
When is this usually? Is it while your grandparents are still with you? Is it up to the individual parents to give whatever they want to give when they give it?
So people, oftentimes people buy it as a gift for mom and dad or for their grandparents. And then when we record the interview, what we do is we then give the interview to whoever recorded it. So if grandma and granddad interviewed, then we're giving it to them, even if somebody else gave it to them as a gift. And then it's up to them where they want to share it. Now, what we've heard from people that have done these, we've done quite a few of them, almost 100 at this point. What people have said is it is a beautiful experience when Thanksgiving is around, we clear off the plates, we sit down, we put the video on, because granddad's going to tell stories to me that he might not tell to the kids.
Yeah.
Grandma's going to answer questions about how hard it was to have those children or what kind of experiences she had along the way that you maybe wouldn't think to ask her. So they watch it and they describe it as being like the best holiday they've ever had in their lives.
Oh man.
Because
what we have,
I'm getting emotional thinking about it.
I lost my mom. I lost my sister. I can completely tangibly relate to what he's saying. If you have a video that your sister, or your mom or your dad was talking directly at you using your name, not like going through scrolling through pictures on Facebook. This is a different experience altogether. Did you guys know that the new thing is AI? Is they're going to come in and they're going to capture your parents' personality, their voice, their look, and you're going to actually be able to sit down one day and talk to them as they might talk to you with the right advice that they might give you. Is that crazy?
I mean, I think AI is going to do some pretty wild things. I have a buddy that's actually a farmer out in Montana. He said he thinks that this age will be the least photographed time in our history. And I was like, why? What do you mean? He's like, we have so many photos. How are you going to know which photos are the most valuable? It used to be that you were printing off a photo. It took you 35 cents. So you knew that photo was going to be something worthwhile. You stuck it in a book. And now imagine you trying to find a photograph just of the last couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
You got to scroll and scroll and scroll.
Yeah.
So you want to try and find a way, like, how am I going to make it so that these photographs or this video is set apart? And that is an important thing to think about, because really, we're creating our own noise of like, oh, let me get another photo and another photo and another photo.
Yeah.
Hard to sort through.
What about AI in the ag industry?
Oh, this is happening right now. So most of the work of an agronomist, so that's the person that stops by your farm and says, hey, I'm looking at what you guys are doing here. And, you may want to add some fertilizer at this time, or you may want to do this. Most agronomists, half of them, are below average, right? So all you got to do is create an AI that's better, that's at 50% as good as the best one that's out there.
Jeez.
And you've now outcompeted all the bottom 50%.
How about that? Which
Right?
you could do right now, probably.
Yeah. And so what's going to be valuable is there's a really neat company out there. This is a company we should talk
insider
about.
trading stuff.
There's a company out there called farmtest.ai.
Okay.
So what this company has done is they said, hey, if you go to Monsanto and they say, hey, show me the trials that show your corn crop is better than this other company's corn crop, what's Monsanto's trials always going to show? They're going to show, we have a little bit more yield. Our corn's a little bit stronger.
Right.
Or like, hey, if we use this fertilizer, we use this pesticide, which one's a little bit better than the competitor? What he does is he takes the same data that you're using on your planter and on your combine, and he lets you run side-by-side scientific trials that allow you to do control groups like, hey, we're not going to use pesticide here. Now we are going to use it here. And then at the end of the year, it calculates, was that worth it?
Yeah.
So when you have this testing methods in there, you won't need some like big brain guy around. You'll be able to input that into the computer, and it'll be able to start telling you on these fields, you should use this fertilizer, you should use this pesticide, you should plant these corn, and they're going to be more and more productive. So that company that's nobody's talking about that company. That is a very big deal.
Okay.
There we go.
I got $20. Let's go throw some money at this.
We'll talk to Vance. Bringing things back a little bit more serious. Tabitha brought a little bit of this up. You came up. Did you grow up on a farm, by the way?
I grew up just about 3 blocks from a dairy farm. So I was the kid that was hired to go bale hay and walk beans, but I was in town. I was a townie. Okay, you were a townie. You understand the farming industry. You got into it. You made a living with it. What do you see happening with American farmers, smaller farmers? Are they making it? What's happening? Well, you mentioned inflation a couple days ago, and you were talking about that's going to impact our children, our grandchildren.
I believe so.
It's impacting people right now in a huge way. And what happens with inflation is it floods all the way to the edges of our culture, and then it starts coming back. And when it comes back, the first waves are a little big, and then the next ones are huge. And what's going on is when coronavirus happened, the farmers weren't even asking for money, but the government started pumping it out there. What happens then is all of a sudden land prices shoot up, right? And now everybody's got more money, so you can pay more money for that ground. So when the land comes up for auction, money keeps going up. All the equipment prices keep going up, all the inputs. So what happens is you end up having it where the small guy can't stay small. Because if you have more acreage, then you can sell more corn, but for a lower margin, right? And so now all of a sudden, anybody that was trying to make that work by having just a small acreage and just it won't work. Yeah. So inflation causes consolidation in the market, and so one of the most pernicious things. This is why I say when the government touches it. No matter what their intentions are, good, bad, or indifferent, they're going to mess it up. And that's what's happening to small farms. They have heavy regulation. The inflation is just killing them because while they may get a check from the government, their neighbor that's bigger than them gets a bigger check from the government. Yeah. And so the small farms are being pushed out by the very regulations that the government's saying are helping. They're like, I'm helping, and they're holding them under the water.
It's all ebb and flow. And now you have this drought in the middle of the country to worry about. You have inflation to worry about. You have eggs not probably. Where's the light at the end of this tunnel? Do you see it? Do you see? Because you're right there. You're looking at the whole landscape. Is there a light at the end of this tunnel? Do we come out of it okay? Or does the whole industry change from this point forward?
The best thing that all of us can hope for is innovation, right? This podcast right here is innovation. You guys are like, hey, I got canceled. I'm going to create my own studio. I'm going to figure out how to do this where I don't need a big FM radio tower out there. I'm going to do something different. So as things collapse, what grows up in its place is just like after a wildfire.
You're right.
And so to me, the best thing that can happen is get past the chaos and start letting things grow. Yeah. And don't allow the things that keep things from growing, which are rules and government intervention. Clear those away and make it so people can do what they need to do.
Can we keep you just for a few more minutes? You have time?
I'm happy to stay. Yeah.
I just want to make sure not to be selfish. It's very popular. People are there. Can you talk about, and obviously we're throwing you on the spot. I mean,
You're not going to hurt my feelings.
Okay. Bill Gates buying farmland. Your thoughts, things of that nature. What's going on with him? What do you think the outcome is? Your thoughts?
Well, so this is where I am torn, right? So I am absolutely a free marketeer. I believe like
we are too.
You shouldn't tell somebody whether they can or can't. but it is a very real thing for these large institutions to be taking their money and buying land. But here's why they're doing it, right? They're doing it because they're looking at the value of the dollar, and they know the value of the dollar is going down, and they know there is no more land. You can't just go create more land. So if you know the value of your dollar is going to be 10% less next year, why wouldn't you go buy land? And in fact, it benefits you to buy land as quickly as you can, because it's going to cost you more dollars tomorrow and more dollars tomorrow. And so when I look at that, I really strongly dislike it. How do you stop it? I don't know.
You legislate it. You have to legislate. It's like this BlackRock stuff that we keep talking about.
But then that's I know, but then that's also
because
legislating free market.
Yeah, but we legislate OSHA. We legislate all kinds of stuff.
We do.
You protect the consumer, or the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few kind of stuff. Anyway, but you're right about that.
That almost gets into socialism.
It doesn't get into, well, you know what? It gets into protectionism. Right? I mean, it's into protectionism.
I'm a believer that anytime the government touches something, they make it worse. So as soon as you start saying, like, we're going to regulate it, what's going to happen is Bill Gates is going to pay a bunch of attorneys to figure out how he can get around it. And you, the little farmer, the little egg producer, the little cattle rancher, doesn't have those attorneys, and you're not going to be able to get around it.
Right. I guess the free market does take care of everything. But if you don't legislate things, if you want to say Bill Gates is going in there buying everything, can China go in there and buy everything?
This is another big challenge, right? Do you allow foreigners?
Legislate it. I think it's fair. That's fair.
Let's look at something real here, which is there used to be 6 ag companies. 3 of them were United States companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is now 4 ag companies, and only 1 of them is American.
Okay, wait a second. Can you explain that again for our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, so there used to be.
That pissed me off.
That's the encore.
Yeah, so like, this is a big fucking deal that when Trump was in office, he was the one that said, yeah, I'm gonna let this go through. But what happened was, all these companies started looking down the road, and they said, it is too expensive to innovate. We can't. The amount of regulation we have to do. So what are we going to do? We're going to sell, because if you have a whole bunch of stuff, you have pharmaceuticals, you have other parts of your business, you can lean on that when you can't innovate in ag. So what they started doing was they put up for sale. So there used to be Dow, which then became Dow DuPont. There used to be Monsanto, which was bought by Bayer. There used to be Pioneer, right? Which was so I'm starting to get the names mixed up, but they were created into be Corteva. Syngenta, which is a Chinese company, bought up what it was the other American company. So it's been so long since I've talked about this.
No, we get it. We're getting it.
So there's a German company that Bayer that now owns what was Monsanto. A Chinese company owns what was another American company. The only one that's left was Corteva, which and the rest are Austrian companies. So the American ag industry, it went through such a fundamental shift about 4 years ago, and the American had no idea. No, they're a processor. They're not a seed producer. Yeah. No, they had no idea.
But there's a rub in there. What's the policy? Do you allow foreign countries to come in here and be, it seems like just getting back to basics, you produce your own food, you produce your own energy. And then that's where you can make legislation like that says American companies, we till American land. Is that too simplistic?
So what I think is the most important thing, we've touched on it, but we haven't really said it, is if you fix the money, then you fix the world.
Yeah.
Right now, what we have is a government that anytime they need to pay one of their bills, they just print more money, which is effectively just steals future value from people.
Okay. Yeah,
and so until we fix the money, the regulations won't matter. The Chinese are just using the dollars that we're printing out, with that printer. And they're turning around and buying land with it. Same thing with Bill Gates. Until we fix the money, we are going to watch continued consolidation.